Today in our How to Loom Knit series, we'll be knitting in the round, learning how to make a basic beanie with ribbed brim in all sizes. This is lesson 7. Welcome to Good Knit Kisses. We're all about helping you stitch your love and love your stitches. In this video, we're covering a lot. First, we're going to be making a beanie. We'll be using this pattern, so click down in the link below to get that. We'll be covering things in the how to make a beanie, such as the Longtail Cast on, the ribbed brim, knitting the length, and making the modified gathered bind off. And then we will cover the length that you need to customize and make your own hat in whatever size you want. We'll also be covering appropriate yarn and loom in order to get the best pairing. And then we'll also be looking at the comparison of Uknit versus Ewrap and the difference in those, plus a few tips along the way. I'm going to show you how to make the actual beanie first, so just download the pattern or open up the blog and go skip right where it says instructions, and that's where we're going to pick up. I'm going to show you how to do the Longtail Cast on right here and connecting it in the round, and then we'll work through these basic components of the hat structure together, and then we'll worry about things like sizing and stuff like that. The Longtail Cast on is nice and stretchy, but it has a nice firm edge. So we're going to make that start with a slip knot at your peg 1, but first you're going to make a long tail. That's why I say Longtail Cast on. So we're going to start our cut edge of our tail and go all the way around 3 times, wrapping the yarn around your loom. 1, 2, and 3. In fact, you can kind of back off just a few pegs if you like. And then we're going to make a slip knot right there, okay? And we're going to place it on our peg 1. You can take that extra yarn off of the loom, and you're going to place it peg 1, nice and loose. It doesn't need to be tight. In fact, don't do it too tight. The tail yarn is going to be towards you, and I like to say that because tail toward and bee in the back, ball in the back, okay? So this is our working yarn, and that's attached to my ball. Okay, so the tail is always going to be E-wrapped. So think that this is E, okay? And then we've got the U-wrap, which is coming from the ball. So this is going to be U-wrap. So even though we just put a slip knot on that peg 1, we're going to U-wrap knit that. Now I'm working in this direction, okay? We're going clockwise here, but if you're going in this direction, then you would wrap like that, okay? So I'm just going to wrap it just like I would going that direction and knit over. That first one I'm doing loosely because I want to connect these two later on once I take it off of the loom. All right, so now we're with the one that towards us, we're going to E-wrap that next peg and then U-wrap with the ball yarn. And then knit over and tighten, okay? E-wrap with the tail, U-wrap with the ball, knit over, tighten, E-wrap tail, U-wrap ball, knit over, and tighten. You'll have 2 pieces of yarn in the back here that connect, so there's 2 lines and then the stitch in the front. Go ahead and work all the way around, and we get to this last peg, pause your video, and I'll meet you there. When you've completed all cast on stitches, just take your yarn and put it to the inside, and you're ready to begin your brim. The pattern is written using a 2x2 ribbing for the brim. You can also do a 1x1 ribbing for the brim as well, where you will knit 1, purl 1, and then knit 1, purl 1. So repeating that all the way around. So you need to have a multiple of 2. To do the 2x2, you need to have a multiple of 4. And that's all the notes we're going to make as far as sizing goes on here. So in order to do that, you're just going to take your ball yarn and connect the first stitch. Make sure my tail is underneath that. And the first one is going to be knit. And I like to make that very first stitch a tighter knit stitch, just to have it a nice good connection, nice tight connection. And then the next stitch will be purl if you're doing the 1x1 ribbing, just like that, and pulling up and taking off and placing. Or if you want to do the 2 by 2, you are just going to knit that first stitch, okay, and then knit the second one, and go ahead and make that tight on just the first round only, and then you're going to purl the next 2 stitches. So a little trick to having a nice edge is making the first round a little bit tighter, and then all the other rounds on the brim make it a little bit looser. So I'm going to make the next 2 stitches, knit and knit, and then purl, and just continue on. If you're going to make an Ewrap brim, you're just going to Ewrap those first 2 stitches, and you can leave them not worked. So say this was 2 knit stitches in Ewrap, you can leave them not worked and then purl the next 2, and then Ewrap the next 2, and then when you come around, you can knit off all the Ewrap stitches and then immediately wrap them again and purl the next 2 stitches, and it makes it easier to work your brim very quickly. This would be an Ewrap version right there. So continue working on your brim, and then you're going to get it to the length that you want, the desired length. Look in your pattern for the different sizes of how long, and we will be right back. For more tips on the rib stitch, be sure and click down on the link below so that you can see the previous lesson on that. You're going to continue knitting till you get to the desired length of your brim. If you do not want a hat that has a folded up brim, then you just knit the desired length that you think that will look best on what you're working on. This is a baby or premium hat, and this is about 1.5 inches or almost 1.5 inches. You could even do 1 inch if you like. If you want to have a folded brim, that means when it's folded over like this, it's going to remain that way all the time. So you're probably going to want to double up the length of the brim that you make, just so that it doesn't have this odd edging to it. Okay, and here's an example of one with a 2-inch brim. Okay, so this is a 2 by 2 2-inch brim, and this is almost a 1.5 1 by 1 brim. All right, continue working until you get that length. In order to measure it, you're just going to stretch out your brim just a little bit, because it's going to be stretched out this way, and you want to make it a little bit longer to relax it. And measure starting your 0 right along the line between the 2 stitches. Just put that line there, and then pull down a little bit and measure. This one's not quite 1 inch, and so I want to knit a few more rounds. Or you can measure out and count out how many rounds you did if you know what your gauge is, and that's if you knitted a gauge swatch to begin with. Or of course you can flip it over and use the metric system to measure in centimeters. Once you're done with your ribbing, you want to work your main knit stitch. So if that's a Ewrap, make sure you're continuing to make sure it's very loose. When you pull your yarn around, you want to make sure it's a continuous U around and knit over. Don't pull it too tight like I was showing in the very beginning, just because I wanted that nice edge detail. Now you're going to continue working that knit stitch on all stitches, continue working in the round, and you don't need to count the rounds or anything like that. You don't need to count how many times you go around. You just want to measure with your tape measure, similar to before. I tend to take it and measure with the 0 down, facing downward. So let's do that here. Put the line here and put my finger and hold it, and then stretch out my tape measure so I'm looking at my inches here, or of course flip it over if you're wanting to look at the metric system. And then you're just going to tug down on my hat, make sure this is not twisted, and see that I've measured about 7 inches here. Okay, you can also, to be more accurate, is take off this from the loom. Okay, you want to put in a scrap piece of yarn, and then you can take everything off of the loom and lay it flat and measure it to be very accurate in that way. Most of the times the hats measure okay doing it like this. It'll give it a little bit more length on it once you take it off, but this is pretty good. So continue working on that and knit to your length, and we'll see you soon to bind off. All right, we are ready to bind off. Now the pattern calls for the modified gathered bind off. I'm going to show you what a regular gathered bind off is, just so you know, and then we'll do the modified one over here. So the gathered bind off, you're simply just going to measure all the way around the loom, okay, and then cut your yarn, all right, and then start weaving through all of the stitches. You can use a tapestry needle to go through all of the pegs, or you can use your tool. So I prefer to just go ahead and use the tool. Now in this case, I'm not going to use this hat, so yes, my stitch marker is all the way over here. You would want to finish all of your stitches to the last peg, but for this purpose, I'm just going to show you from here. So I'm just going to go up through all of my stitches like this, pulling from the bottom, or you can pull them from the top, but just do all the same way. All right, so I'm going to do this from all the way around, and I'm going to pull it to and show you what the top looks like. Okay, I've gone all the way around. I'm going to go through the very first stitch one more time, and then just pull them off of the loom. And if you cut it too short, you can just start taking them off of the loom before that. I would just leave the very first stitch on there, and that way you can go through it one more time. So take these off, and then you're just going to pull the string just like a drawstring. Tighten, and you can see that it leaves a little hole at the top like that, and then it's bulky. Okay, now this is a thinner yarn, but on a thicker yarn it can be a really bulky top. So it's just all of those stitches closed and condensed together. The bigger the hat, the bulkier it will look at the top, and then you just weave it in. I'll show you how to weave in a moment. Modified gathered bind off, we're going to measure 1.5 times around the loom. Okay, when we get to the back, you're just going to cut that yarn so you have a nice long tail, and we're going to take off every other loop using the method from the gathered bind off. You're just going to go underneath that first stitch and pull upward like you're making a purl, and just pull it all the way through. Then take that yarn and put it behind the next peg, skipping it, and then do the same to the other peg. So all the odd stitches here, so the first, third, fifth, and so on, get taken off this way. And as soon as you do them, you can take that loop right off of the loom. And in this case, just go ahead and take this one off here, skipping one and purling that tail all the way through. Okay, go ahead and do all the stitches, and when you get back to this very last stitch, meet me here. Pause your video and I'll see you in a moment. All right, we're at our last stitch, which should be an even stitch, so we're going to skip behind that one. Okay, and the first stitch has already been done, so we're going to start with the second stitch. All the even stitches are left, so we're going to place our yarn above the stitch, and we're going to knit, pull downward like we're going to knit, and then pull the tail all the way through, and then you can just take that right off of the loom. So put your yarn behind the pegs and put the tail above the stitch, pull downward and pull through. Take that off of the loom. Continue all the way around until all the stitches have come through. You can see on the inside how it skipped every other one, and when we pull on it, it's going to become a spiral when we pull this. All right, pause your video and I'll see you at that moment after you take that last stitch off. Okay, so we've pulled our last one, and you can see that there are 2 rows or rounds of this yarn going through. So it's going to make a spiral. When we start pulling from the outside, you can see the top one start, but the one on the inside is not. So we are going to want to make it tighter as well. It will be easier to see it from the inside. So I'm going to pull this until it's closed mostly, and then I'm going to put my yarn on the inside and turn my hat inside out. Okay, and you can see this yarn is puffed up a little bit. That's part of that strand that we want to make sure that it gets pulled. So just keep pulling, pull gently. Okay. I have to tug a little harder. There we go. Now it's pulled all that slack out and it's made a nice little spiral on the inside here. There's part of the spiral is here, and then it goes all the way in. Okay, and if you look at it from the other side, you can see it's really diminished that bulk, and it's a little bit poofy right here, so you see that I've missed something. So I can just pull on that a little bit tighter. So I didn't quite get it. And that's that beginning part. So let's pull that strand out. See, and I even forgot. So I'm going to take this beginning strand here. This is that beginning peg. And I'm just going to pull upward like that. And what I'm going to do is take my tail and stitch it to that very first stitch. Okay, so I've got my tapestry needle. Okay, so this is like my first and last stitch here. So I'm just going to pull upward, find that next one right here, and then I'm going to go through these next stitches. Okay, and once I pull tight, now it's really closing that tightly. Okay, so I just did all those other things to double check that I had all of it tight enough. And then now I'm just going to go around all of these stitches on top. We're just reinforcing this circle, make it stronger. And then once I come all the way around, I'm just going to go down into the inside of my hat and turn it inside out again. And then now I can go through this inside circle here, reinforce it. And then we can tie a knot and weave in our ends. You don't necessarily have to tie a knot, but you can. And an easy way to do that is to go through a stitch or two, leaving a little bit of a hole or a little bit of a stitch left, a loop, and then go through that again, and then weave through a couple of these stitches here. And then cut your tail and turn that inside out. And then you want to weave in this tail here. And to weave in your tail for ribbing, we have that on our video for the rib stitch, but you're basically going to go through and connect these first. Okay. In order to connect these, just pull on this tail here, and we want to connect these two stitches and complete this little chain look here on the end. And that's how we can connect it in the round. Okay, and then just go on the inside, and now we come up just like we did on working our tail in with ribbing, and come around this rib column on the inside, and then it will maintain its stretch just like that, and then work in a few stitches upward. And then cut your tail. And you've finished your hat. Let's look at the hat chart so you have a better idea of how long you need to knit, as well as the circumference to match the head size that you need. You've got major groupings for baby, child, and adult, and then of course the subgroupings. Baby goes from premium to 12 months, child is 12 months to teens, and then adult is women and men sizes. Now, of course, in those categories, there are ranges of sizes. So in head circumference, this is the measured distance around the head. You have a range of sizes. Preemie can be anywhere from 7 to 13 inches, and some could be even smaller. Newborn, 13 to 14, and so on up through here. Even myself, I fall a little bit above this women's category, so I do suggest, if you can, measure around the head of that person that you're going to make it for, or fit it to the larger size, because it can always stretch from there, but you can't make it bigger after that. Okay, so these are the measured amount, but you are going to have a bit of a stretch in your hat, and that's called ease. Now, we're not going to talk about that in here much, but I will say it's generally about 25%. So if you're working gauge and you want to measure your stitches on here, then you can take, this is just a generic number here, but you can take, say, my circumference is 23, so I want to multiply it times 0.75, and then I can find out the minimum inches that I need to figure out how much to cast on. So that's just a quick tip. Once you find out the minimum inches that you need, then you'll multiply that times the stitches that you measure across in 1 inch, and that will be your cast on. When you know what your cast on will be, you want to make sure to have a multiple of 4 for best results, and that will get you a 2x2 brim here, or you can have just an even number if you want to do a 1x1. For the hat length, there's suggested sizes. All the ones up top is what I'll refer to. Whoops. These up top here, this is standard in inches, and then down below is metric, so look at those if you need it. Over on the left, let's look at these 2 lines here. We have hat length without folded brim and hat length with folded brim. This just has to do with whether you want to fold it up or not. It's not the actual length of your ribbing. So if you want to know how much more you have to knit, then you're going to take the difference between these two. So this one right here, 12 months to 3 years. From 6 inches to 8 inches is 2, so you're knitting 2 inches longer. If you want to have that extra 2 inches that folds up to be the same underneath it when it folds and to be ribbing, then the first 4 inches of your hat needs to be the ribbing. Okay, so if you're making this 8 one that's folded up, you're going to have 4 inches of ribbing, and then the rest of that 8 is going to be your stockinette. I hope that makes sense. If you want to work metric, just look down here at the links and everything. And these are just suggestions, and you can make your brim, the ribbed edging, you can make that as long or short as you wish. That's entirely up to you. Let's talk about yarn weight and pairing with the right loom, because that matters. So what you choose matters. Notice these 2 yarns here. You can see that the one on the right, the green one, is thinner than the one next to it on the left, this blue one. It's actually about 30% difference. So this one on the left is 30% difference, but both of them are a number 5 bulky weight yarn. However, they're made on the same looms as each other. If you notice, the ones on the right are narrower and the ones on the left are a bit wider and bigger. The stitches are bigger. You can actually measure across and count how many stitches per inch that they are, and I would need more stitches on the ones on the right in the green in order to get the same size here. So what you pick matters even if they're on the same loom. So you can do some calculations. We're not going to cover that in here, but you can do calculations in order to add more stitches to use the yarn of your choice. You just need to change. So that brings me to the next point of, if you stick with a pattern, if you're concerned on size, you can stick with the yarn and the pattern that they use. And in fact, you can go to the store and compare the yarn just by putting them side by side to get one that's going to be about that same size, to keep your stitches that way until you graduate into learning how to calculate these. If your unit is just a touch too small on the looms and you want to use the same yarn and looms, you can step it up with an Ewrap. This Ewrap is going to be much stretchier. You can see how if you stretch it too far, it can leave a gap and you can see the ladders. But even without stretching, you can see that this physically is larger. So if you want to try stepping it up with an Ewrap, you can. And you can see the brim actually looks very nice on this Ewrap hat. One of the questions that people have when Ewrapping is, how do I avoid that big gap from my first peg to my last peg? Well, on this one, this was actually my first peg, so you would have seen a gap here had I wrapped all of the pegs at once and then knit over and then wrapped all of them again and knit over. It would have carried a channel all the way up here and you would have seen a gap, or it would have been too tight between here and too big between here. The way that I got around that is I just worked 5 stitches at a time. I wrapped 5 stitches, knit them over, and then I wrapped 5 more and knit them over. And I got this really nice and even look on this knit hat. So that's how you would bump up your knitting. You can make just a slightly larger hat on all of these. Let's learn how to read a pattern for hats in multiple sizes. We haven't covered actually reading the patterns yet in our series, but I think it's really important for this one so that you don't feel lost. First, when you open the pattern, it gives you an overview of what you're going to be working on, the materials you need, of course, the yarn and the weight of it, the loom gauge. I've got 5/8 large gauge loom and our little icon here. And then these other ones are suggested looms. So the first ones are what we used in the samples, and we'll usually note that. So in this one, we're working with a 24, 36, and 48 pegs with the Knitting Board Premium Chunky Round Knitting Loom Set. Okay, and then these other ones are ones that you could use to get the same exact hat. So if you don't have this one, but you work with Kiss Looms, this is what you would do. If you want to work with the Cindy Wood, that's what you would do. And then there's other brands available. Skip over to the next page, and that's where you see the extra notions that you might need, any abbreviations that we're going to have in here. The gauge, okay, so the gauge is the measured stitches in an amount of measurement. So we measured across in 2 inches or 5 centimeters in Stockinette. So that's the main body of the hat, this main part here, okay? So it's 5.75. If you take this number, 5.75, divided by 2, you get how many stitches are actually in 1 inch. And you can see that we used it using the Ewrap knit. Okay, so that Stockinette is for the Ewrap. This is an easy level, okay? Even though there's a whole lot of wording in here, it's still easy to actually make. The measurements here are calling out extra things with parentheses, and it might look a little confusing. But the first number is for the first size, okay? So when we go down to size, you can see the first one is newborns, okay? And then when you see the parentheses, you see first size here, which is 14, okay? That is for ages 6 months to 5 years. Then there's a comma, and then the next size is there, and that is 6 years to adult women. It's got quite a range in it. And then it fits the circumference of heads for these sizes. So if the measured size or max size of that head are any of these measurements, then you're going to want to use those. If you print this off, you can highlight. Say you want to use this one, you're going to highlight and use that number whenever you see the parentheses down below in the pattern. Okay, and then you've got the length or the height of the hat. So from here to here, that's this part here. So it's 5.5 inches for the length, 7 or 9.5 inches. And then down here is the metric. And then sizes, we went over that. And then these are notes that are covered. Now we've already covered most of this in the beginning of this video of how to make all these things. So we've got most all this. I also put in here the knit stitch that I recommend and the stitches per inch if you use the Ewrap of the Stockinette. Okay, the next page is the hat size chart, which we've already gone over. So you want to measure your circumference, measure your length from the top of the head to the nape or bottom of the neck, and you can go around the ears so you can figure out this length number as well. And then you decide on how long you want that ribbing to go. And then there's quick links to do the cast on, the rib stitch, stockinette, or the modified bind off all by itself. Or of course you can click in the video for some of those as well. Then is the main pattern on the last page. That's where we talk about casting on. And you're just casting on to any one of those looms, 24, 36, or 48 stitches, and connected in the round. We've already done that. You work your brim, you work your stockinette, and then you work your bind off, and then you weave in your ends. And that is how you read this pattern. So for our How to Loom Knit series, we have more videos coming up. Be sure and click subscribe to get more, but also remember that some videos are going to be going further and beyond the basics, and those will be for VIP members. They'll be free for the first 2 days for public. So if you want to join as a VIP at the minimum level, level 1, 2, or 3, you can have access to all videos later on. Be sure and click join down below or click subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications so you know when they're coming. Our next videos will be on increases and decreases with more patterns to come, as well as learning to size your items and read patterns. Thanks for joining us today, where we help you stitch your love and love your stitches. See you again soon.